Today, we'll talk on the 12 dependent originations. And the 12, it is also called the 12 links of dependent origination. In Buddhism, there are the Pratyeka Buddhas and the Stravakas. The Stravakas are those who listen to the Buddha's teaching, or who, after the Nirvana of Buddha, in later generations, in later centuries, who read the Buddha's teaching, and from the language, from the Buddha's teaching, they obtained, through practice, they obtained Nirvana. These are the Stravakas. Through listening, the power of listening and reading and the books and teachings, through listening and practice, or through reading and practice, they have something to depend on, the Stravakas. We are in the process of the Stravakas practice, because we read, we listen, we have language, we have words to depend on for the Buddha's teaching. But in other periods in the cosmic time, there are also the Pratyeka Buddhas who did not live in the time of the Buddha, who didn't have any teaching to depend on. No Buddha's teaching, they just depend on their own self-enlightenment through their observations, through their own intellectual understanding of the cosmos, of the universe, all through themselves, their own efforts, because they didn't have the Buddha to teach them, they didn't have monks and saints and sages who would teach them. They did not have the Buddha's teaching, no books or anything like that. They just depend on their own observations and intellectual thinking. And through observation and intellectual understanding of the 12 links of dependent origination, they obtain Buddhahood. Pratyeka Buddha, we call them Pratyeka Buddha. In the next half an hour, let's go through these 12 links of dependent originations. We can learn a lot from why do we go through life and death? How do we get away from life and death? The 12 links of dependent origination provide a detailed description on the problem of suffering and rebirth. Now, these 12 dependent originations are ignorance, mental formation, consciousness, name and form, the six senses, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, aging, and death. Now let's go through the first one, the 12 links. This is in the cycle, ignorance. Dependent on ignorance, mental formation arises. Or we can say ignorance is the condition for mental formation, because everything is causation. Because of ignorance, we have mental formation. In other words, dependent on ignorance, we have mental formations. What do I mean by this? What is mental formation? Mental formation is like reaction. Because of our ignorance, we react with our ignorance. For example, we have mental defilements, we have depressions, jealousy, hatred, disappointment, fraudulence, all these things, all this reaction is because of our ignorance. We kill animals for food, we commit sexual misconduct, we are greedy, we curse, we lie. All these reactions, we react to our own ignorance. We have ignorance of this. So our ignorance misleads us into doing the wrong deeds, creating bad karma. Ignorance is the condition for mental formation. Mental formation is just reaction, it's just like reaction. Or we can say ignorance is the condition for reaction. Or we can say, on the other hand, from another angle, depending on, because it's dependent origination, depending on ignorance, reaction arises. Karmic reaction arises. Most of this reaction is non-virtuous, is not right, not good, evil actions, for example. Sometimes we may perform virtuous actions, good actions, non-evil actions, but we may have performed them with attachment too, because we want good results. We do good deeds with attachment. This is also impure. From a perspective of complete eradication of ignorance, this kind of non-evil or good performances also have attachments to it. So ignorance is the first link. Depending on ignorance, because of our ignorance, reaction or mental formation arises. Mental formation needs more explanation, or reaction needs more explanations. Depending on ignorance, mental formation arises. Mental formations refer to the impression or the habits that we have formed in our stream of conscious moments. They are formed by repeated actions, just like the formation of a river by repeated flows of water in the stream. In the same way, our actions become habitual, like killing animals for food. Eating meat is like habitual eating. We don't know such habit is not right. We kill animals for food is not right, but we're habitually doing that. We have an egoistic feeling of protecting our own egos, and that's habitual thinking because of our ignorance. These habits become part of our personality, and we take these habits with us from life to life in the form of habitual energy. You see, this is reactions. We've been doing that out of habits. We're egoistic out of habits. We want to commit sexual conduct, for example, out of the habits. Depending on ignorance, or ignorance is the condition for reaction, for all these mental formations. Okay, next one. Mental formation is the condition for consciousness, or reaction. Creating all this karmic energy is the conditions for consciousness. Now, we think in this way, because of our ignorance, we create a lot of karmic energy. And because of this karmic energy, we've done, for example, we've done the wrong actions, the wrong speech, the wrong thinking. Then when we died, this karmic energy won't go away. This karmic energy would carry us into the next chain of life and death. So depending on this reaction, this karmic reaction, consciousness arises. In our consciousness, it's all been tainted with this karmic energy. We have the consciousness that's been tainted with this. This consciousness is tainted with evil actions, with evil speech. And with this consciousness, we call it alaya consciousness. When our body died, the consciousness would not die. The consciousness would just roll on to the next life. We call it alaya consciousness. Remember, we talk about 8 consciousnesses, and the alaya consciousness is the storage consciousness, which store all our mental formations, our reactions, all the karmic energy, all stored in there. And why do we have all this polluted consciousness, alaya consciousness? It's because of our ignorance. Because of ignorance, we perform all these reactions, all these mental formations, all these bad deeds, and all these bad deeds will become like a karmic energy that gets stored into our consciousness. And when our body dies, our consciousness, we, quote unquote, I, will reincarnate with my consciousness into the next life. So the first and the second is the general concept for the 12 links. Because of ignorance, we perform karmic energy. Because of karmic energies, we have retributions, we have suffering, and we carry all this into store into our consciousness. When our body dies, it does not mean that all these things disappear. It would roll with our consciousness into the next life, with our polluted alaya consciousness. Nothing would disappear. You have done something wrong in this life, you think when I die, it would disappear. No, the karmic energy will carry on. Third, consciousness is the condition for name and form. What is name and form? Name and form means mind and body. Name, because how do we start our thinking? We start our thinking with a name. No words, we can't think. No language, how can we think? How can we think of an orange when we don't have the concept of an orange? So name and form actually is the Chinese interpretation. So what does that mean? With consciousness, depending on consciousness, mind and body is form. What do we mean by that? Now, our alaya consciousness, when it's because of ignorance, we perform all these, we carry out the karmic energy and store into the consciousness, and even if the body died, the consciousness would not die, it would roll into the next life, and roll into the next life, the first to get into the embryo of your mom is the consciousness. Invisible consciousness. In other words, when a man and a woman comes together to perform that relationship, and when the sperm and the ovary fuse together, then your consciousness zoom will shoot into that with that combination, will shoot in there, and it becomes what you are in your mom's embryo. The consciousness would go first. That consciousness would go the last, leave the body the last when you died. And when you reincarnate, it would go first into the reincarnation. It leaves the last and it goes to first. You understand what I mean? So when a person passed away, his eyesight is gone, his senses are gone. No more nose function, ear functions. Slowly, everything will be gone. And the last that leaves the body is that alaya consciousness. And somebody call it the soul. Well, it does not matter how you call it. That consciousness, we call it. The calling it the soul is too spiritual. Why don't we just call it the consciousness, which is more of a modern term. And that consciousness, when a person dies, it leaves the body the last. And it leaves through the 6 locations because of the 6 paths of reincarnation. When it leaves through the sole of your feet, that means that person is going down to inferno. When it leaves through the kneecaps, that person is going to the animal realm, reincarnate in the animal realm. When it goes to the stomach, that person goes to the ghost realm. When it goes through the chest, it goes through the human. It's going to the human realm, reincarnate into a human again. If it goes through the eye portion, it goes to the deva realm, which is the heavens realm, the beings in heaven. When it goes through the top, it goes to the Buddhahood realm. In other words, this person would not go through any more reincarnation after this life. It goes right to Buddhahood, enlightenment realm. So the 6 realms, going up through the 6th realm, it leaves the last. So some people like to test out on the diseased person where his or her consciousness has left through what location by putting the cloth through certain location and test out if the whole body is all cold and if there's still a little bit of heat in those 6 locations, that means it leaves through that locations, which is very scientific, because if you have a rod, if you have a burning rod, the heat of the rod will disintegrate. It depends on which locations it becomes cold. It gets the heat gets decreasing and decreasing, and the last location that the heat has decreased, it's the location that the heat leaves the burning rod. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, right? No, you don't need more example. Depending on consciousness, name and form arises. That means consciousness is the conditions for name and form, or consciousness is the condition for mind and body. Now, what does it mean by mind and body, name and form? When the consciousness enters into the mom's body, then something is formed. The mind and the body, not just the body. In other words, whatever that entry does not mean that only the material enters. The material enters for the soul. It's the consciousness that enters, but immediately that fusion is a matter. It's the body, but it's the body in an ovary form, in a molecule form, in a minute form. So already formed, when the consciousness enters the body, that mind and body is already formed in the mom's body. You see how this change worked? Because of ignorance, depending on ignorance, reaction mental formations and karmic energy is created. And because of this karmic energy, and later we'll go through the whole period of life, and then when we die, the consciousness leaves the body. And because of this consciousness entering the body, the mind and body is formed. The fourth, name and form is the condition for 6 senses. Name and form is body and mind, or mind and body. So, when the mind and body, that fusion of the sperm and the ovary is in the mom's body, it is still growing. The 6 senses will be coming out. The eyes of that fusion, the nose, the ears, the 6 senses. It's growing and growing and growing every day when the mom is, if it is healthy, it's growing and growing. So the 6 senses will be developing inside the mom's body. So depending on mind and body, the 6 senses are formed. Now when we think about these 6 senses, these 6 senses are formed, and these 6 senses will be the future outlets for environments, for everything surrounding us. But these 6 senses are already formed inside the mom's body. That these 6 senses provide outlets for interaction with the outside world. So they are very important. In the future, karmic energy are created through the outlets, through the 6 senses. We see, we hear, you taste, you listen. All these are created. All these 6 senses are created right inside the mom's body. So mind and body is the condition for the 6 senses. When we come to think of it, the Pratyeka Buddha, they didn't listen to the Buddha's teaching. They did not have any books to read. They did not have any sutra to chant. They just observed, and through the intellectual understanding, they observed this chain. And they got enlightenment through observation of these. How did they do it? We've been talking, we have a lot of books, videos and tapes and all that. And these Pratyeka Buddhas, they just, through their own intellectual internal observation, through their mind, they know these things and they practice accordingly. How do they practice? We carry on, you know how they practice. So don't underestimate this page. This page is about all of us. This page about all of the universe is in this page. You see, the Buddha's teaching has a lot of facets. One of the facets is the Pratyeka Buddha teaching, enlightenment. Just by following this, you already can attain nirvana. Okay, name and form is condition for the 6 senses. So the 6 senses in the mom's body growing and developing. Contact is the condition for feeling, or depending on contact, feeling arises. This contact has 2 facets. The internal contact with the mom Let's talk about internal contact. That baby in there has contact with the mom, physically and mentally. When the mom feels happy, he or she feels happy. When the mom feels sad, he or she feels sad. When the mom is always mad, always have a lot of tantrum, then the baby come out habituated to have a tantrum. So a lot of people believe that you really have to have that internal education. You start when the six senses are starting. In other words, education does not wait till the baby comes out. It's inside already. The mom needs to educate the baby. Through what? Through her own mental formation, through her own mental feeling. If the mom is always compassionate, if the mom is considerate, if the mom is courteous, if the mom does not have a tantrum of temperament, if the mom is always kind, if the mom becomes a vegetarian, so many education that the mom can get into that embryo. So contact is with the mom's contact. If the mom drinks something cold, then the baby feels cold. If mom something hot, the baby feels hot. That's internal. Then when a baby comes out, the baby is born in a hospital, Richmond General or whatever, or the hospital, St. Paul's. You know. The baby comes out, the baby then have direct contact with the environment. When the baby has contact with the environment, the baby has feelings. When the baby isn't happy, the baby will cry. When the baby is happy, the baby will smile, will laugh, will giggle. So there's contact. Depending on contact, feeling arises. Pleasurable feelings, unpleasurable feelings, neutral feelings, general. This is general feelings. Feelings have so many kinds of feelings, but generally it's either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. Let's put it this way. The list is inexhaustible. What kind of feelings? Is almost like a thermometer. It depends on what degree. 1 degree, 2 degrees. You know, you can't really classify every feelings, so the Buddha said generally is pleasurable, unpleasurable, and neutral. But it's more than that, more than that. Feeling, the amount of feelings is immeasurable. It beats descriptions in feelings. And then, dependent, the 7-chained link, depending on feeling, craving arises. At babyhood, the baby craves for something, for milk, for good food, because of the feeling, because of this feeling, there's craving for something, desire for something. When it's in the babyhood, when it's a teenager, when it's a toddler, a teenager, developing into adulthood and all that, all the time, he or she is craving. You and I. Depending on craving, clinging arises. You cling on, to attach to things. I attach to fame, reputation, wealth. I attach to good food. I attach to good brand names. I attach to everything. Clinging is attaching to everything. Craving creates all these things. Do you have those kind of cravings? Do you have those kind of attachment? I bet you do, because I have. Everybody has. Depends on the degree, the magnitude of it. The 8th, craving is the condition for attachment, clinging. Attachment is the condition for becoming, because we attach to everything. We can't let go of things. We're always desirous of something. Then that is a condition for becoming. What is becoming? Becoming is creating a lot of bad karmic energy. That's becoming. Becoming is the actions that we perform in this life. In other words, the habits develop over countless lives. combined with new actions performed in this life, result in a lot of things, result in becoming, it results in reincarnation, resulting in all this karmic energy. Becoming is the conditions for birth. Because of all this karmic energy created, depending on becoming, then we'll get rebirth. A birth is the condition for aging and death. Depending on aging and death, depending on birth, aging and death arises. When you're given birth to, you're doomed to have aging and rebirth, aging and death. Everybody has to die. Everybody has to age. Because you've been born. You've been born, you go through aging. You've been born, you go through death. No exception. So birth, depending on birth, aging and death arises. 12. Depending on aging and death, ignorance arises. Because of this aging and death, we cannot get away from aging and death to reincarnations, because we're always involved with ignorance. We didn't know how to meditate. We didn't know how to free ourselves from karmic energy. We do not know how to practice. We're egoistic. We perform a lot of karmic energy. This is ignorance. Because of that, it's aging and death, and it's never ending. So aging and death, depending on aging and death, ignorance arises. Or aging and death is the condition for ignorance. And because of this ignorance, we have mental formations. Because of mental formations, we have consciousness. Because of mental consciousness, we have mind and body in the mom's embryo. We have the 6 senses, contact, feeling, craving, attachment, becoming, birth, aging. It's all in a loop. We have been living that all in a loop, life after life. And do we know about it? And because of this aging and death, together with sorrow, lamentation, physical and mental sufferings and tribulations, thus arises this entire mass of suffering. This entire mass of suffering starts from what? Ignorance. And ignorance carry on and on and on to another life, life after life after a link of dependent originations. Right now, you have done the most important thing in your life. You are trying to get away from ignorance. Why do you come for meditation? Why are you getting interested in the spiritual path? Because you want to get away from ignorance. This is an extremely important moment or extremely important year in your life. You want to get away from all these. You want to get away from these 12 links of dependent origination by practicing the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's teaching is geared towards eliminating all these. By stopping all these, eliminating all these. And we have a term in the Buddhist teaching. We call it nirvana, or we can call it nirodha. Or nirvana. Nirvana is what? Stopping all these things. Nirvana. We go to nirvana. We want to stop all these things. This, from ignorance up to aging and death, 12 links of dependent origination, it's just like following the stream, the water, unending flow of water. Habitually, we've been following this. We follow it. Now we want to go upstream. We don't want to follow it. We want to cut it. Don't you want to cut this suffering? Don't you want to cut this physical and mental suffering? We want to cut it. We don't want any more of this life. You think this life is pleasurable? Lots of suffering in this life. I don't have to go through what kind of suffering we have in life. We've gone through many, many times. We haven't even mentioned the suffering in wars. We only mentioned suffering, individual sufferings of aging, sickness, getting old, getting sick, or getting crippled, and all that. We haven't gone through the mass suffering that we have. Wars. How many people were killed in the First World War? Millions. How many people were killed in the Second World War? 7 to 80 millions. Many suffering war. Humans are killing each other. So we know this is the flow, the dependent origination. How do we stop this? Nirvana. Stopping this. So let's go through. How do we stop this? Go through number one, ignorance. With the complete eradication and cessation of ignorance, mental formation cease. If you stop ignorance, you stop your mental formations, you stop your reactions. With the complete eradication and cessation of karmic mental formations, then consciousness ceases. You don't have to get into a mom's embryo anymore. No more of this going through all these. With the complete eradication of consciousness, of mind and body, you don't need the six senses. No need for six senses, no need for contact, no need for feeling, no need for craving, becoming and attaching, no need for aging and life and death. No more of all those. Eradicate all those. Then, with the complete eradication and cessation of all these 12 links dependent originations, there comes the eradication of suffering. No more suffering. So what's the base of this? The base is in ignorance. And I still remember Lao Ji, one of the philosophers, the ancient Chinese philosophers, uttered a word. He said, problem arises because we have a body. You think, but people think, I got a body, this is a good body. But that is the problem. This body is the problem. But that's not the root of the problem. That's only the branch. Get to the root. What is the root? The ignorance that we have. Every Saturday you come and you try to do a little bit of work on the eradication of ignorance. Whether that is enough or not, then you know. But enough or not, is it ample for a complete eradication? It may not be in this life. But once you sow that seed of trying to get away from ignorance, that seed in there would grow someday. Someday you will know, with that seed, I have already learned, I want to get away from ignorance. And in this life, I don't want to waste my life anymore. I want to pursue that eradication of ignorance. And some people don't. Some people would go through wealth, reputation, fame, enjoyment, luxuries, enjoyment of the six senses, enjoyment of the ears, the nose, the taste. They want to taste animals fresh for food because they like to taste, they want to kill, they want to commit lots of karmic energy which would carry into this chain of reincarnations. Non-ending, no stop, non-stop. The Buddha has got away from all this. All Buddhas of the past have got away from all these. The future Buddhas would get away from all these. And if you have that seed in there, you are the future Buddha. You and I, we are the future Buddhas. So don't you know that that step that you have taken to know the Buddha's teaching and to practice it is a very important movement, a very important moment in life. You have started it already. Are you going to carry that on? Some do it in one life and stop in the next life and carry on in the other life. The Buddha said, yes, there's a seed, there's a bija in there, a seed in there. When the seed is in there, what does that mean? It would grow because the seed is planted. Is there water for it? Is there fertilizers for it? Is there sunlight for it? Is there manual labor for growing it? It depends on you. You water it more, get more sunlight in, you try your work, it grows faster. If you come for a day of meditation, you don't come for 6 months, come for another day, it grows slowly. Then you go through more suffering. Which do you prefer? So let's carry on. I said half an hour, but I only cover half a page. There are two main ways to interpret the 12 links. Sequential interpretation. Over a period of 3 lifetimes, the past life, present life, and future life. The past life, in other words, where do you fit the 12 links of dependent originations into a time frame? What kind of time frame we have? We have the past, the present, and the future. That's the time frame. Now, how do you fit this 12 links dependent originations in there? Past life, because of ignorance, because of this mental formations, represent conditions that are responsible for the occurrence of this life. Why do you have this life? Because of your ignorance. Why do I have this life? Because of my ignorance. If I involve in more ignorance than you, I suffer more than you. That's why we're not equal. You're better than me. You look prettier, you look stronger, and I don't look that way because I'm more ignorant than you in previous life. Through my actions, I have killed, I have committed sexual misconduct, I have done a lot of karmic energy that brought me down, and you haven't done that much. And of course, there are saints who are enlightened, who have already enlightened. There are saints and Buddhists and Bodhisattvas who vow to help us to understand all this. Why do we chant mantras? We invoke these enlightened beings to help us. And they are all ready to help us. It depends on how you link up with them. There's another part of the Buddhist teaching. This is the Buddhist teaching in relation to the reality, to the realistic world. The other is the more spiritual side of it. There are beings who are ready to help you. Why do we chant Om Mani Padme Hum? Why do we chant? Why do we meditate? Sometimes it's invocation of help. It's just like you ask help from a doctor. When you're sick, you ask help from a doctor. When your books is in confusion and you want to be part of the government, you ask help from an accountant. And when you have legal matters, you ask help from lawyers. But you got to pay them. But these sentient beings, these enlightened beings, you don't need to pay them because by definition of complete enlightenment, they live as if they suffer. When you suffer, they feel they suffer. It's just like the mom. The mom always are ready to help the kids. They won't forsake the kids. They won't let go. They won't forget about their folks. They always want to go back there and save them. But if you are ignorant, you cannot access. You don't have access to them. You don't have link with them. And meditation and chanting and mantra chanting and sutta chanting, all this create link. Not just link, create understanding.